All right. So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Employability Skills Series, where we explore the top skills employers are looking for in candidates. Each week, we will cover a different topic with thoughts and insights from professionals in a variety of industries. I am your host, Megan Morrow, Senior Associate Director of Experiential Learning and Employer Relations, and today I have Ryan Buckley, Director of Development here at FSC, as my guest, and we will be discussing the importance of networking. Ryan Buckley is the Director of Development at Florida Southern College. He is originally from Long Island, New York, and attended Florida Southern College from 2011 to 2015, and again for his MBA graduating in December of 2016. Ryan got his start with the Tampa Bay Lightning organization and their client service department. He then worked back in Polk County for Visit Central Florida, followed by his tenure with the Lakeland Magic, the G League affiliate of the Orlando Magic. In his first season with the team, Ryan worked in an account executive role in the corporate partnership development, finishing fifth in the G League in sponsorship revenue. He worked his way up to vice president of the team, responsible for all revenue generating roles within the organization. Most recently, Ryan was the director of member experience with Orlando City and Orlando Pride soccer clubs. Ryan managed a team of 6 to 8 individuals who oversaw all of the season ticket members for both clubs. Ryan returns to his alma mater as the Director of Development for the Barney Barnett School of Business and Free Enterprise. He is also on the boards of the Central Florida Speech and Hearing Center and the Florida Festival and Events Association. Some other fun facts: he has managed 8 individuals with the Lakeland Magic organization and managed a team through COVID. He oversaw a 12-person department in Orlando City Pride with 6 to 8 direct reports. He can also dive into feedback, performance review structures, the importance of establishing transparency during one-to-ones, as well as work-life balance implications in feedback. So, good morning, Ryan. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Great bio. You have a really extensive background, which I love. And we're colleagues here at Florida Southern College. So, is there anything else that you'd like us to know a little bit about you and why you wanted to talk about networking skills with us today?
Yeah, it's a comprehensive bio. I appreciate it. I am also the chapter advisor for Delta Sigma Pi. And so recently here on campus, and so recently we actually just did a recruitment event where I was the featured speaker and talked about networking with intentionality, and that led into a networking event. So
Okay.
this is pretty timely considering we just came off of that event for the group and the brotherhood. And I think there's some really good key lessons that we learned just in that event and also in the build out of building out a presentation on networking for that event. So excited to share some of the findings and results.
Oh, awesome. No, this is perfect. And then also too, we have our mocktails coming up next week as well. So that's another networking event for students who don't know. It's on Tuesday, so a week from yesterday. It'll be at the admissions building from 5:30 to 7 p.m. We've got about 16 companies coming. So this is a great opportunity to learn about networking, what we need to be doing and maybe not doing. And I'm glad that you just had this experience with DSP. And so let's talk, let's just dive into it. Like, so what exactly is networking and why is this important?
Yeah, so I kind of separate, networking the three bubbles. I think of it as there's a social networking component. So it's how am I, connecting with individuals through a LinkedIn, through social media. I think there's a second bucket, which is kind of your more formal networking or event networking, where it's I have an intent in mind and where I'm trying to get to. So I have a goal preset prior to, connecting with individuals and what I'm trying to achieve post event. And then the third one I actually frame as more casual networking,
Okay.
everyday conversations. And it would be I'm in a class and I'm talking with a new classmate. I'm rushing a fraternity or a sorority. It's kind of more casual style networking. It doesn't have as much of a formal end goal. There are end goals to it. And so broadly, I think under that umbrella, networking is to me an art of being able to work with a group of people across various relationships. Some people I may know really well, some people I may be meeting for the first time, cultivating that relationship to move it to a desired direction. So I think if you wanted a definition style, that's how I would define it. And then I think it breaks out into a couple of those different areas or environments, of how you would flex it.
Okay. No, I like how you break that down. I'm taking some notes so that I can kind of reference back to them as we talk over this next 30 minutes. So the social, the formal, and the casual, very important. And I like to tell our students too all the time, like we're always networking. Always, the conversations that you're having could be in the line at the grocery store, or could be, like you said, speaking in a class. Whenever we have guest speakers, I know I like to have a lot of guest speakers in my class. I'm always like, connect, connect, connect. You never know who knows somebody. And I know that you have offered this in the past, and so do all of my speakers. Like, hey, if you're interested, I'll look at your resume, or we could do a mock interview, or if you want me to connect with you, or connect you to somebody that I might know in my network. Like, that's how it all works. And I just
Right.
recently read a study because I knew it was high, but I think the most recent statistic is now like 85% of jobs and internships are secured through networking versus the traditional just applying for a job like you see on LinkedIn or Indeed or Glassdoor or something like that. So this is a really important skill that our students need to have, and everybody needs to have, right?
Yeah, actually, to follow up on that stat, another one that's in that same ballpark. So referrals, right? And I would attribute referrals to I've been able to network and cultivate a relationship with somebody, right? So network is kind of your infancy stage, build a relationship, and now I have somebody that'll actually refer me for a role. If you look across LinkedIn in a study they did last year, 6% of individuals who applied for a role used a referral in their application, but it was responsible for 37% of filled vacancies. So the
Oh.
margin of, I'm going to practice what I preach, right? So, and
Mhm.
I would use the example, and I'm not going to be hypocritical. I was the same way in college, was someone offered to say, hey, feel free to reach out. Here's my business card. Like, what percentage of people are actually following up and reaching out? I would take a venture. It's a very, very small number, right?
Yes.
So similarly, it's a small number that actually use the referral strategy, but it actually yields the highest positive outcome. So in
Okay.
that regard, to kind of translate it back to the students, it's don't just go off of what's preached, right? I mean, practice it. Like
Mhm.
separate the I know I should do it with the I actually did it. So I'm going to reach out and grab a coffee. And I think to that point, not to get too off topic, you'd be surprised sometimes with meeting somebody that you don't feel you have a direct pathway with, how often that'll actually open a door. So I
Mhm.
grab lunch pretty consistently with people. And oftentimes, I grabbed lunch with a banker yesterday, just as an example, and they're not an alum. They have no real tie to the college, but they're good. They had a conversation with Drew Howard in athletics, and so
Okay.
they were interested now in learning more about athletics, right? So, now that relationship has actually gone into a specific direction with an end goal pertinent to that conversation. So, but I did not walk in thinking that was even in the realm of possibility,
Yeah.
right? So I think oftentimes, too, to your point, building your network or having a conversation at the grocery store, the other side of like, what's the harm in having the discussion? Like,
Right.
if there's a zero harm to it and a zero loss, take the discussion, see what door may open, and then walk through that.
100%. Um, and the reason I think of grocery stores, there's a great story that one of my speakers told in the class. He works for Coca-Cola now. He was saying how he was just stocking the shelves, and there was this older gentleman who was kind of talking to him. And of course, he was like, he's working. He doesn't necessarily want to be bothered. But of course, he's polite. He just continues to talk to this older gentleman. He said he was like in his late 80s. And he's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. You know how, like, old people tend to do. They just want to talk. And so he's like, yeah, yeah, okay, whatever, whatever. Still being very polite, whatever. And finally, when he's done talking, he says, hey, man, he goes, by the way, I'm the CEO of Coca-Cola. Like, what are you doing stocking shelves? And you're like, come with me. And the guy gets this major promotion from being just the driver. I don't want to say like just the driver, but he went from being a driver's, shelf stalker to like now he's high up in HR making, really good money, really good living, and all because of the networking, because he was just having a conversation and he was his authentic self, which is something important that we all need to be at all times because you just never know who's who. And I say this to my students all the time too. You need to treat the janitor with the same respect you treat the CEO because you just don't know who's who, and that's just good life advice.
Yeah.
But yeah, having those conversations, I mean, you're only going to benefit. There's no downside.
Yeah, and I think to kind of switch gears a little bit and somewhat related to the story you shared, perception drives reality, right?
Hmm.
So how you're perceived by the audience drives the reality of how they view you moving forward. So like two more statistics I always find fascinating. So if you go to a networking event, you're in a room, you've been there for 2 minutes, people can already form a lasting impression of you. So just that 2 minute window has actually already developed their perspective on who you are as an individual. Now, a lot of that you can dive into like nonverbal cues and verbal cues and best practices, and you can go down a rabbit hole with a lot of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But for good reason too. But really
Hmm.
what it boils down to, kind of what you're saying is, what do you have practiced and pre-canned that you can use in general conversation? And I oftentimes actually think that's overlooked. So, what is your elevator pitch, right?
Hmm.
Is like cliche as sometimes that's overused, but like, what is your internal elevator pitch that you have that you can quickly on the spot say about yourself, why you're a differentiator, what you're trying to do, and have that 30-second window. But also like, how do you just handle a conversation? It's an art. There's actual art to it. I mean, when I managed the team in Orlando City, that was a weekly training, was how do you deal with this conflict situation? How do you deal with continuing a conversation with somebody who's not conversational? How do you control the conversation? How do you
Hmm.
switch it to where you're in control? So it's a rabbit hole you can go down, but I think during this time, it's worth exploring to really hone in on your skills.
Oh, 100%. And we have so many opportunities for the students to practice. So, like you said, you just did one with DSP. We have one coming up next week. So, for let's gear this towards someone who's never gone to a networking event. They
Yeah,
don't know what to expect. They're probably a little bit nervous. So what should they do? Start from the beginning.
sure. So I think number one, it's always good, always best practice to try and know who's going to the event, right? Like
Hmm.
I emailed you last week, actually, as a matter of fact, like
Hmm.
right or talked to you about it. Hey, who's going to be at the networking event? I'm just curious. I always think it's good to know your audience,
Yep.
particularly if it's somewhere where you're trying for a job purpose to potentially work at. And you can start doing some background research, right, on the company and any social media news that's surrounding the company or individuals. So I think that's a good best practice. Second is I would hone your elevator pitch, and I would make it in a way where it's not robotic. I'd make it
Okay.
where it's free flowing and dynamic, right? And I think intuitively it'll be robotic because it's the same over and over, right? But it should feel ever flowing and green. And then the third is I always, with my previous teams, have always preached this, like, find people's passions and pursue that. Because the most interesting person in the room is the most interested person in the room. So, and you mentioned it, Megan. I think you have to be authentic with that. Like, if you
Hmm.
genuinely don't like something, you don't have to pretend it's your favorite thing in the world, right? But find where their passion is and try to find some crossover. So I talked to a student who's taking a job in Spain. And so we had talked about Spain. I got married in Spain. So we talked about Barcelona and what that life is like. And so, it created this natural pathway. The conversation ended on Geico. It went like four different directions, right?
Wow.
Part of that is just being able to find like what people's passions are and then control the conversation, get them talking. You're getting that information. And inevitably, most roles are sales oriented to some
Hmm.
capacity. So asking discovery questions, mastering conversation, and doing it in a way where you're storytelling will make you the most interesting person in that conversation. And your goal, in my opinion, as a general goal, should be to be the most interesting person in the room by being the most interested person in the room.
Yeah, that's a good distinction because I think I know I say that to my students all the time, like make sure that you're interested, not interesting. And what I mean by that is that
Yeah.
you're not talking about yourself as much as you're trying to get them to talk about themselves. And you made the comment about discovery questions for somebody who's never been in sales. Those discovery questions are just that. They're questions where you are discovering, you're asking these leading questions to find out, tell me about the business, tell me about yourself. How did you get into it? Kind of pooling information out of that person that you are networking with. So, like you said, you could find some kind of commonality. The fact that you had that Spain conversation, Or maybe you find out like, oh, hey, like my son is a Marine. Oh, well, I served, or my dad or uncle or sister served, Now we have that, that kind of thing in common. Or,
Yeah.
oh, maybe you played soccer or you played lacrosse in college. Well, so did I, or I was in athletics, finding that commonality, because likeness, people like to be around people that they are like them, right? So I like that you made that comment about that you become interesting by being interested, and that's by asking those questions. So how would they go about, you said like knowing who's there. So we've let the students know who's all coming. So what should they do as far as like researching the company, researching the people? How would they go about doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I always try to think through, okay, make it manageable. So I have these five companies that I'm really interested in making sure I interact with. Because going through a list of 20s, it's a lot. You could do it. And maybe it's more, Megan, but going through a list that'll make up a number of 20 and sorting through, there's a lot of background research to do. But give yourself a manageable number of people that and businesses that you genuinely want to make sure you have an interaction with. I would always go through social media. Because to me, going through a Facebook, going through an Instagram, it's prevalent for their marketing purpose. And if it's prevalent for their marketing, it's prevalent for all ends of the business, right? Like it's something that they're preaching about. So that's generally a good starting point.
Okay.
I would then look at, is there like what's the crossover or time? Do they have an open internship opportunity? Do they have a full-time opportunity that's open? Do they have nothing open? And I would just get a general gauge of the direction of the business, because at those events, it's not a while it's not a career fair, the intention behind it is facilitating a network between a potential future employee and a potential future employer. So it's
Mhm.
it's a very light environment to ask some of those questions, where it doesn't have to be as formal. So saying, hey, I saw a post online about, your involvement with this nonprofit. Like, tell me about how that relationship started. Just
Mhm.
a question like that is just going to signal that you did research. Okay, they did background on the company and on me and on. So I would have like two or three of those questions you could quickly pull, just out of your back pocket, because the way I would view it is they're going to probably hear the same questions nonstop. And
Yeah.
so if you can separate yourself with one or two questions that aren't the same, you'll actually stand out. So I call them, like it's a random question or an unorthodox question. And I think the ones that always do well are, hey, someone gave you a full day off and you can do whatever you want to do. How would you spend your day?
Okay.
Because that's going to lean into their hobbies or what's
Yep.
important to them. Hey, you're at a dinner table and you can invite three people that are alive. Who would you invite and why? It'll give you an idea of, did they invite, is there a celebrity? Is there, right? And it gives you like a leading point to go from. And oftentimes those are the ones that are going to stand out to them because they have to stop, think about it. It's not rehearsed, it's very authentic. And it'll give you a little bit of a, actually, I think it'll improve the conversation, that you'll have.
Yeah, because you're getting them to talk more personally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice. Something else I would say, like you said, it's not a career fair, so you don't necessarily have to come like in a suit and tie, or don't need a briefcase or whatever. It wouldn't hurt to have a portfolio of where you've taken some notes so that you can reference them when you're meeting with the company. I like what you said too, like pick about maybe four or five companies that you're for certain that you want to talk to, do some research on them, find out, their mission and vision. Like you said, if there's any open opportunities, especially if it's in the industry that you're looking to go into. But I'd also say talk to everybody. As well, as much as the time permits, as much as your bandwidth permits, talk to everybody, because you just don't know like what kind of opportunities, like for example, like auto owners is an insurance company.
Yeah.
My brain immediately thinks claims, underwriting, customer service, but they also have finance, accounting, they have nurses on staff. And I'm like, why would a insurance company have nurses? Well, if you've got a claim with injuries, you need someone with a medical background to be able to make those determinations if that is a valid claim. I'm like, I never would have thought that. So talk to everybody, but also make sure, like you said, you've got your pitch. It's authentic, it's not robotic, but you should be able to have a couple questions that are pulling from them about themselves personally, professionally, and about their company.
I would also add to that too, it would be good insight to have if you know someone working at their current location. So like auto
Hmm.
owners maybe trigger that because they have a lot of Florida Southern alum who work there,
Yes.
but like are there locations where you have a friend or a former classmate that you have a good relationship with that you can reference? Like, oh, I know so and so is currently working at your location. We did XYZ together during his time
Right.
here or her time here. It's good to have that reference point, particularly at small office locations. When
Yes.
they're really interacting with those individuals on high frequency, it's okay to have that perspective and referral because that's what's really at the end of the day, that's what's really going to open the door, depending on where you want the conversation to go.
Yeah, I like that. It's important. Something else I wanted to piggyback on just real fast, it just triggered me while you were saying that, was about you talking about how people make that impression of you within the first minute or so. So it's important that you do dress the part. Like I said, you don't necessarily have to come in a suit and tie, but like a polo shirt, a collared shirt, a nice blouse and slacks or something like that. You don't want to come to something in jeans and a t-shirt. I mean, if you were going into horticulture and you were going to go talk to farmers, yeah, sure. But this is, if it's more of a business side, you want to dress the part because people are going to be making those impressions of you. Like you said, so not only are you going to have your questions, you're going to have your elevator pitch, you're going to be prepared, but you also need to be on the outside prepared as well, because that will boost your confidence and it shows that future employer that you are presenting professionally. Because if they were to hire you, you're representing the company, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the one last, without overloading all the tips, the one last tip that I think would be a good one is really fine-tune storytelling.
Hmm.
Storytelling is a much better way to get a point across than just spewing a fact or spewing data. And I'm a data person, so I live and die by data, but you have to frame it in the right way. And that same article I referenced earlier, it looked at networking in person and what was a better recall. So people are 22 times more likely to remember something when told through a story rather than told as a data point. So
Okay.
if I told you that data point, right, as an example, in conversation, it's not that you couldn't recall it, it just wouldn't stand out as much. But if I gave you a story about an individual who totally changed their dynamic from doing this data point methodology to telling it more of a storytelling format, they were able to, go from this part-time worker to this, big success, and it's because of this data point, they're going to remember that. Like the
Hmm.
draw is the story which pulls the data point. Similar to you sharing, hey, um, it would be you shouldn't turn away a conversation with anybody. I'll give you this example, an anecdote about Coca-Cola. Right? Like
Hmm.
your presentation of how it's worded is in story format. I'm more likely to draw that story to get to that point. It's the same way, in these conversations. And again, whether people want to admit it or not, sales is embedded in every role. So the
Yes.
ability to tell a story and have that conversation, people are looking for people that can hold a conversation and have soft skills. Storytelling is a step further to that. It means you have the ability to take in the information and data and present it in a way, and frame it, which is a very big skill for employers.
That's huge. Yeah. Story. I mean, because I say that all the time, like, tell a story. Yeah, it's impactful. People relate to the stories. I like that you're reiterating that point, versus just spewing data, because then it just sounds like rehearsed. It sounds like you just hurried up and threw some stuff down on paper, and now you're just kind of like spitting it out and like verbal vomiting, like, here, I know it, I know
Yeah.
stuff about you. But yeah, a story will go a lot longer. How about, is there anything that you would advise against, for someone going into a networking event, especially probably for the first time? Is there something that they should not do?
It's a good question. The two things off the top of my head, I would toe the line of I'm being aggressive and I'm being excited.
Okay.
I think that's a very difficult line sometimes to avoid, particularly when you're in that mode of I need an internship or I need a job
Yeah.
or I need like because it's not a job fair. And so I
Right.
can see that balance of I'm being too upfront with where I'm at and what I need. And really the event doesn't lend itself to that, right? The event lends itself to developing a relationship. So you're not going to get the carrot right away. So I see that being a potential pitfall, as one aspect. I also think, sometimes there's a pitfall within a group dynamic of like when you're in a group, it's okay to lead a conversation. It's also okay to not lead a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. But that's going to happen, right? You're going to have more people there wanting to talk to professionals than the other way around. So you're going to be in group dynamic conversations. Like that's okay. You don't have to take the lead on everything. You don't have to switch it to everything that you're comfortable with. Sometimes nonverbal cues are fine.
Hmm.
Nodding your head to tell you're listening to a story. When you're curious, you tilt your head slightly. Like it's okay to have some of those nonverbal cues lined up within that conversation. I just wouldn't be in a spot where you feel like if I can't interject with something, I just should leave or be disengaged. Because that
Okay.
nonverbal is easier to actually pick up on than the verbal. Like it just in your brain, an employer is or anybody is going to recognize that and be like, this person's just shut off and disengaged.
Yeah.
Like
Very true.
it's very easy to see. So those would be the only two things I would really caution against or just be mindful of, in
Okay.
that type of dynamic.
And I'm going to piggyback off of that and say one thing also too, you can come with friends, but don't gravitate as a group around. This is about you building your network. Especially if you're a little intimidated, by all means, bring your roommate, bring some of your friends, bring your classmates. We love to see as many people there as possible, but you need to branch out and be on your own, talking to those employers, and not just depending on your circle of friends to be there with you because they're there to speak with you individually. And I would practice so that you feel confident. The first time I read your bio, I had to read it a couple times in my head, read it out loud before I read it on camera so that it was smooth. And so I felt more confident. So the more that you practice, think about a sport you play or an instrument or any kind of craft that you do. You practice and you get better. It's the same thing with networking. It's the same thing with interviewing. It's the same way with just talking to people in general. The more you do it, the more comfortable you're going to feel. The more comfortable you feel, the more smooth and confident it's going to flow. And then you're just going to feel much more at ease. So with that, I would say, and I know that we're kind of almost, gosh, we're almost out of time already. I would say, like if you know that there's 4 or 5 companies that you're like, this is it. I really want to speak with these. I really want to work for this company. Go talk to some of the other companies that you're like, it's not your industry. It's not your field, just to kind of get your practice, get your feet wet a little bit, get your confidence up. And then you can go and talk to some of the other companies. Just be mindful of the time.
Yeah, like
Um,
I'll add this in real quick because I know we're out
mhm.
of time. But
Yeah.
with my team in Orlando City, I mean, I had a team of 12 at one point. So when they onboarded, it was like 2 or 3 months before I let them go on a phone call, let alone have an in-person conversation. And we would sit and record them and just say, hey, you're saying as a filler word. Like
Yes.
instead of saying take a swallow, take a pause, and eliminate that. And it was repetition, right? And it was practice. And you know, you it feels counterintuitive to hire somebody and basically say, "Hey, you need practice right away." But that's like the nature of it is your first impression is really going to impact not just the role but the organization and that this light's a killer in
Yeah.
that specific
Mine does that
environment.
too.
It's a killer. In that specific environment, your first impression is really going to dictate your success long term. So we needed to be sure individuals from a public speaking side were as prepared as possible. So speaking clearly, being articulate, being able to have an authentic flow, like you mentioned, Megan, are crucial. The only way you're going to be able to do that is practice and
Yeah.
it's repetition. And so I would advise on top of that, I would take this week and just have two impromptu conversations with your friends where you do a role play. And it's sometimes just something as simple as that gets you in the mindset of what you should avoid doing and what you're not cognizant of. Like there's just
Yeah.
things you're not aware of because you're doing it. You can't watch yourself, but if
Right.
you have somebody that can hold you accountable and be transparent, have that dialogue and see if you pick up any tips before the big day.
Yeah, film yourself on your camera, do that. Also, too, I say, listen, as a mom who my son's gone, like call home, who's ever home, mom, dad, auntie, grandma, grandpa, whatever. They want to hear from you, I promise you. If
Mhm.
you call home and be like, hey, can I practice my elevator pitch with you? They're gonna love it. Call your best friend, call somebody, FaceTime. But like you said, the more practice you get, the better you'll feel. Start with your stuffed animals and then work up to real people if you're super, super nervous. Because I know that speaking to, public speaking, I think is the number one fear that people have, the social anxiety evoking kind of fear. You and I do this all the time. So for us, this is like it's just another
Hmm.
day for us. But for people who are new to this, like I'll tell you, next week on my call is my sister, and she is not a public speaker at all. To tell you, like she texted me last night. She was like, "I thought our call was tomorrow. I've been so nervous. My stomach's all in knots." And I'm like, "Oh, girl, are you kidding? Stop! Like it's just you and me have a conversation." But I forget, like for other people being on camera or being in front of people is very, concerning. So
Yeah.
practice and you'll feel so much more confident. Ryan, we are out of time. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for our students on the call and those that are going to be watching this later?
I'm in 214. If anyone would ever like to have a conversation or drop by or, ask for insights or feedback, I'm more than happy to help in whatever way possible. I know you and the career services team do an amazing job, but if I could be a resource, I'm more than happy to do so.
All right, and that's 214 in the Becker
Sorry, I'm
Business
Becker.
Building. So he's on the second floor, and I'm on the third floor at Becker as well. So please, or go see Career Services and Rogers on the first floor. We want to help. We're here for you. Connect with us on LinkedIn if you're not already. Swing by our offices. Stop us if you see us on campus. We're only in our roles because we love to help. So we're here for you guys. Also, today's group advising. So we'll see everybody at group advising as well. But have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday, Ryan. Thank you so much for your time as always. I enjoy these talks with you. Our time just goes by way too fast.
Agreed. No, appreciate it, Megan. Let me know if I could help in the
All
future.
right, and Jackson and Ryan, thank you for being on the call. Everybody else, see you later. Have a great day. We'll talk soon.
All right, bye. Al.